Feel the heart. Experience the soul. Community Pulse.
It is Radio 786, and once again, to those who have just joined us, a very warm welcome. And as promised, in studio now we have Dr. Faiez Kirsten, who this morning will continue. And last week we focused on the subconscious mind and the power of the subconscious mind, but also how it controls us. And today we focus, as part of that series, we will be focusing on the habits, inshallah. And I think I'd like to specifically speak about how to kick those bad habits that some of us may have. Let's first welcome Dr. Faiez. Assalamu alaikum and shukran for being here.
Alaikum salam, Zainab. Afwan, appreciate being here again.
How are you this morning?
Alhamdulillah, very well, thank you. And yourself?
Well, alhamdulillah. Well,
good.
Where do we start when we speak about habits? How does a habit become a habit?
Well, we've probably all heard, the statement that we are creatures of habit. But maybe I must say first what William James, who's the father of modern psychology, what he said. He said, we are mere bundles of habits, imitators and copiers of our past selves. Habits are the stuff of which behavior consists. So that gives you a very good idea of what habits are. But also Aristotle, he said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So our whole lives are really about habits. But what really is a habit, Now, Anne Gabriel is quite a famous neuroscientist. She said habits are a chunk of actions. In other words, a habit is really a sequence of actions, that is treated by the brain as a single unit of behavior. So you have this, when a habit is triggered, and there's three parts to a habit actually. You have a cue, something which triggers the habit. And then you have the routine, which is the sequence of actions. And then you have a reward. And we wouldn't really engage in a habit if there wasn't any reward. Okay, so a habit is really then a sequence of actions. So if somebody's in the habit of smoking, they'll go through the sequence of actions. They'll take, something will trigger the urge to smoke. Then they'll take the cigarette or the packet of cigarettes out of their pocket, take the cigarette out, put it in their mouth, light the cigarette, and start puffing away. So there's a sequence of actions. But the dangerous thing about habits is that it's done automatically. In other words, there's very little, or in most cases, no thinking involved. And you're not even aware oftentimes of the fact that you're performing this habit. So people will automatically start smoking once they're in the habit of smoking without them even knowing that they're smoking. And in fact, they light a match right in front of their face, right by their nose, without even knowing that they're doing it. So that is what a habit is. It makes you do things without you thinking about it, not being aware of it. Yeah.
So technically, whatever you do continuously is something that could become a habit, whether it's good or bad.
Yes, a habit comes about due to repeated action. Repeated action. So what happens initially, the decision-making part of the brain is involved. The habit center of the brain is called the striatum. It lies deep in the middle of the brain, deep in the center of the brain, called the striatum. And it's connected to the thinking part of the brain. It's connected to the reward part of the brain, the dopamine-producing part of the brain, midbrain. And then it's also connected to the body circuits, those things that make you do stuff. That part of your brain that makes you do things, okay? But as a habit becomes more ingrained, it moves away from the thinking, the circuits moves away from the thinking part of the brain, the decision-making part of the brain, to purely body circuits, those circuits of the brain, that part of the brain that really just drives your behavior. And when it reaches that point, to break it, is it's an art, but we've developed tools to make it easy. It's initially thought that it's difficult to break habit, and that's even common, thinking amongst top neuroscientists. But I found, in my research and the tools that I developed using brainwave entrainment, getting rid of beliefs through EFT and so forth, it wasn't difficult for me to break bad habits. I'm still working on a few, but it's not that difficult, and to put in new habits is much easier also using these tools.
Okay.
But there's ways of doing it, yeah.
You're listening to Radio 786 on 100.4 FM, and in studio for the first hour, Dr. Faiez Kirsten joins me, and we're talking about habits, how to kick bad habits, but also how habits really form. Now, so basically what we are saying this morning is that we are able to program our minds, our brain, in such a way to do, let's say, good things automatically, because you use the word that you don't even know that you are doing it after a while. As soon as it becomes a habit, you don't even realize that you're lighting that match or whatever.
You're unaware that you're doing it, and that's where awareness comes in. You got to start developing your awareness, and that is, all of us should be doing this. They call it mindfulness. I like to use the word awareness, and it's only through awareness that you can, focus your attention on that what you want to change. If you want to become a brain builder, you must be a highly aware person, and one of the things of the global health crisis that I include, or the aspects, is the lack or the low level of awareness amongst humanity. And as we raise our level of awareness, so we can all work towards solving this global health crisis. So awareness is key if you want to become a brain builder. And in fact, you are building your brain. When you're developing a new habit, you're sculpting your brain, because the brain is sculptable. You can shape your brain, okay, through neuroplasticity. That's an amazing thing, ability of the brain to form new neural circuits, strengthen those neural circuits.
So why is it such a difficult task to undo certain habits?
Because the brain becomes hardwired, okay, and you're getting a reward for what you're doing, and then to break that, as I said, takes effort. You got to build your awareness. You got to use the frontal lobe of your brain. You got to start doing certain things that's going to improve your ability to change your brain, okay. So you got to build your awareness. That attention is so important. But meditation is one of the ways to increase your level of consciousness or your awareness. But I used to meditate in the past. I don't do it anymore after I discovered brainwave entrainment. Brainwave entrainment, many years ago, I discovered it, and then I ran with it, and it really it changed a lot of things for me, I must say. So changing a habit is not that difficult if you're doing it in the right way. I wouldn't like to tell people, it's an easy thing, but it's not difficult. And it depends, the length of time it takes to change a habit depends on what habit you want to acquire. Some habits, easy to acquire, takes 21 days maybe, but on average maybe 45 to 66 days. And as I said, just listening to an audio every day, raises your level of awareness, and then reprograms your brain, builds new neural circuits, new belief systems, and then you basically do things, you do these new habits, which I'm assuming is a good habit that you want to develop. Nobody wants to develop bad habits. They tend to develop automatically. But we want to develop good habits, which is going to work for us and our community and for the world in general.
I think it's quite amazing how we don't even think about some of the bad habits that we now have. We don't even think about it. It just becomes part of us, right? But now when you want to instill a good habit, you actually need to think about it and really put your mind to it in order to get to that.
Yeah, the thing about a habit is that even if it's causing you pain, you're still going to do it automatically. I mean, there was a study they did with a rat where they trained this rat, to either drink chocolate milk or sugar water, and they gave it a cue, a sound, and it would turn left for the chocolate water and right for the sugar water. And then they basically made it a habit. They exercised this rat over and over and over again until it became an automatic thing that it would either run left or right, depending on the sound that it heard. And then what they did, they put a drug in the chocolate water, which would make this rat nauseous. And then they give it a cue. And the rat would automatically go to the left, if it was the left-siding sound, and drink the chocolate water, even though it made it nauseous. It would do it automatically, even though there was pain associated with this habit. It would still do it. Like people who smoke, I mean, they end up getting bronchitis, they cough their lungs out, as they say, and they feel terrible, but they would automatically keep on smoking, whether it's alcohol or drugs of abuse and so forth. So when a habit is entrenched, it's ingrained, those circuits are hardwired, you're going to, and if it's a bad habit, then you're obviously on downward spiral, basically, unless you really break that habit and form a new habit.
So let's go into the breaking of bad habits or kicking those bad habits. What would your advice be for those who'd like to, let's say for argument's sake, stop smoking?
Raise your level of awareness. That's the first thing you must do. You must become more conscious, because when you're conscious, when you're more aware, when you are mindful, then mindfulness allows you to observe what you're feeling internally and also your external environment. So when you're mindful, then you basically can see what's happening. Then you can also pull those weeds out of your mind, out of your subconscious. Things that are not working for you, you can change those, and you can put in new stuff that's going to work for you, new habits. So the first thing is to raise your level of awareness, and that will then allow you to be able to figure out what's triggering your habit. That's important to know. Is it a thought that's triggering my habit? Is it a location? Is it an emotion? Is it people that's triggering this habit? You got to figure that out. What is triggering your habit? And then you remove yourself from that trigger, or you avoid that trigger. And then you must reduce your stress levels. I mean, that's so crucial if you want to change your habits, break a bad habit, reduce your stress levels through various mechanisms, methods, practices, techniques. You can use exercise, yoga, all of these things, meditation. And then you must start small, actually. You small steps. In fact, I think one of the first leadership principle of the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, you must begin from the possible. So basically choose, the easiest path to begin with, and one who begins from the possible will basically surely reach his goal. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. So don't jump into habit and do the most difficult part of it. Start with the small things, and then build up from there, basically.
Yeah.
And you got to increase your willpower also, because initially when you're starting to develop a new habit, you're using your willpower, frontal part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, your decision-making part of your brain. And you got to develop your willpower, and you got to build up what we call serotonin levels in this part of your brain, because that enhances your willpower. So sitting in the sun will help you, sunlight, vitamin D, massages, and so forth. So serotonin is one of the good feel-good chemicals. Dopamine, we mentioned, was the other one. Serotonin. There's another two, oxytocin and endorphins. These are all the feel-good chemicals, and they are produced in different situations, basically. And then you got to, as I said, develop your thinking brain, basically, which I just mentioned. So those are the things you need to do in order to develop new behavior patterns, basically.
Give me some examples of people who are very effective and their habits. Effective people and some of their habits.
I suppose people are successful, if you look around you, whether it's in sport or wherever, any part of life, you'll find people who are successful. Those are people who have developed good habits over the years, basically, because it comes with training over time, and then they develop these good habits, and then these good habits drive them towards their goals. Okay, so your goals basically are a function of good habits. And I suppose there's many examples. You just look around you, if a person is successful in one or other field, that person has developed good habits over the years.
And definitely, habits really is about being consistent, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's key.
When you're developing a habit, you must be consistent. So, for example, if you are going to use brainwave entrainment, then you must consistently listen to those audios every day, at least for 21, 28 days, 45 days. And as you listen to this audio every day, you set aside time. I used to do this many years ago. And then just listen to the audio. I mean, it's as simple as listening to an audio. I mean, everybody can do that. And then this sound frequencies and affirmations will start reprogramming your brain. And then your beliefs will start driving your behavior automatically. After a while, once those circuits are developed, that's going to now drive your behavior automatically, and then you don't even have to listen to it anymore. You just basically develop the habit, and that happens automatically, like we said.
So are you saying that it takes about 21 to 30 days for a habit to kick in? It's about, on average, 21 to 28 days. Say 28 days. I like to say 28 days, but it takes longer for other habits, depending on the habit. Some specialist experts say 66 days. A PhD, forget her name now, she said 45 days. But it differs, because different habits take different times to do. And it depends on the person also, Definitely. It's Radio 786 and 100.4 FM, and the first hour we take a look at habits with Dr. Faiez Kirsten joining me in studio this morning. Now, what about those, you spoke about willpower and exercising that. Now, what about people who, we spoke about this before, or just tend to be negative? So you smoking and you want to stop smoking, but yet you don't believe that you are able to stop smoking. You already say, although you maybe started with saying that you want to stop and you're going to do things, you still believe that it will be difficult for you. What if you have this kind of attitude, or this is your mindset?
Yeah, that's become your state of being. Your attitude is really a state of being. So you are actually in a state of being negative. Okay, and that's that belief that you don't have the ability to stop smoking. It probably came about through a long period of self-talk, negative self-talk, because what you say to yourself is very powerful. Okay, and that becomes a belief. So if you're telling yourself all the time, I don't have the ability to stop smoking, I can guarantee you almost 100% you will not stop smoking, because now you have brain circuits that basically drive you in that direction. So what you say to yourself, what you think, and we spoke about thoughts, before, is crucial. You need to become, and most people are not aware of what they're even saying to themselves, because their level of awareness is not as high as what it should be. So when you start building up your consciousness, your level of awareness, your mindfulness, then you become aware. I just thought that negative thought, and then you use these thought control techniques to break that thought, kill the ants, like I said. Okay, so there's many techniques in my book. 2 of my books that I wrote, one is Achieve Your Goals Using Brain Research Discoveries. I describe all these techniques, and in Goodbye Stress, How to Live Stress-Free, a whole lot of techniques are described there that you can use to break these bad habits, bring about new thoughts and beliefs and so forth.
I find it quite interesting how we will find that so many times in the Quran, Allah speaks about developing your consciousness or developing your God consciousness, and every time when we have conversations, it brings us back to being conscious, isn't it?
The sad part about what I see around me is that the low level of consciousness. One of the examples I give is, and I drive on the road, I see people walking across by a robot, the traffic light. When the pedestrian little light says to them, red, it's red. You must stop. You mustn't walk. It's your stop, because it's a red man standing. And people will still walk in the face of that, even though the vehicles are starting to move now because they have been given the go-ahead to go. People are starting to walk across the road in front of these vehicles that are starting to move. Now, obviously, they're probably not aware of what they're doing, because they're just in an automatic mode. So in a sense, we are like robots, unthinking in many ways, and that is why the Quran tells you to think. We have to develop this ability to think, because it's crucial, because we do run on automatic mode most of the time. When you get into a car, you don't think about what you're doing, you just automatically start the car and start moving off. But when you start raising your level of consciousness, like you said, you have the ability to observe what you are doing now, and then you can change that. So you're conscious now, you see the red man at the robot saying stop, so you stop. You don't walk,
Dr. Faiez, Kirsten in studio with me this morning and talking about habits. Before we go for the break, Dr. Faiez, I'm particularly thinking of people who follow blindly. People who follow blindly. You mentioned that it's important to think, and that Allah reminds us constantly about just thinking, about using our mind to think and to decide for ourselves, because that is what makes us different from other creation. But why is it that people still are in this habit of just following blindly without thinking? That is, for me, a question.
I suppose also it's our disobedience now, and I speak for myself also. We don't really listen to what the instruction manual is telling us. We don't even read it. So we're reading other instructions, and they're then programming us with these beliefs, which are then driving our behavior automatically. And that's what's happening across the world. It's part of the mind control. These guys that know that how the mind works, then they program us with beliefs, and we automatically then just follow what they told us to do. So our minds are not really owned by ourselves, really. Other people actually own our minds, and we really need as humanity to start really waking up in a big way. Say, hey, stop controlling my mind, I want to control my own mind. So that's why people are followers. And the sad part about this is what I discovered. I did my thesis on corporate culture. Obviously, people do what their leaders do, and tell them to do. So they follow their leaders. That's why I say follow the leader. You'll find that the leadership in many areas, whether it's in politics, corporations, is not pro-humanity. It's actually anti-humanity. And then people become programmed in the image of their leaders. So a lot of humanity has become anti-human. People just don't care. Their levels of empathy is low. You'll find there's no caring anymore. People don't care about each other. They just care about themselves, which is basically the first pillar of Satanism, really. So people are following their leaders who are really not interested in humanity's well-being. And so we're living in a world which is basically anti-human, and we're trying to live a natural human life, pro-human life, when in fact everything is basically anti-human. So it's very difficult, and unless you become more conscious and more aware and develop your thinking ability, your critical thinking skills, you're always going to be controlled by forces who don't have your own interest at heart, and you're going to be working against your own self every day also, because we're all programmed to serve this agenda which is anti-human basically.
Sad state of affairs, huh?
Tragic, extremely tragic.
We will take a short break, inshallah, and after the break we continue this morning's discussion. First hour speaks about habits, how to kick bad habits. We also touched on following, and blind following, that is, with Dr. Faiez Kirsten. Community Pulse continues on Radio 786 and Radio 1584 medium wave in Pretoria. To those who have just joined us, you've certainly made the intelligent choice this morning. Now we have in studio Dr. Faiez Kirsten, who joins me for now, and we're talking about habits and how to kick some bad habits. And someone via WhatsApp says that addiction is also a habit. And then one person mentioned that Assalamu alaikum, our salah is our level of consciousness.
Well, certainly addiction is a habit. You're in a habit of, whatever you're doing that's addicting you. But there's a very interesting experiment or study was done in Portugal, where they had, in 2001, they had a huge number, I think 50% of the population, if I'm not mistaken, was addicted to illegal, drugs. And what they did was they decriminalized these drugs, and they put the people back into the communities, connected them with their communities. And the number of deaths from addiction or overdose of heroin actually dropped drastically. And, number of deaths dropped, and a number of addicts also dropped by 50%, I think. So that was a massive thing. They say addiction is not... what is missing in addiction is the fact that people are not connected. They're not bonding. So people are bonding with something which is we see as an addiction. Okay, they're just bonding with something because there's something missing in their lives. And oftentimes, if you trace it back, you'll find most people are addicts to one or other things because of childhood trauma, or they call it adverse childhood experiences. And then these are the root cause of the addictions, because people start bonding with a drug or alcohol or smoking with a cigarette because of the pain resulting from the chronic stress related to those childhood traumas that they experienced. So this experiment was very interesting in Portugal, where basically they decriminalized drugs and they connected these addicts with their communities, and so now people bonded with other people rather than with the substance that they're addicted to. And as I said, the results was astounding. So we have to approach addiction, in a different way. As I said, brainwave entrainment is a powerful way to stop addictions. Meditation. In fact, brainwave entrainment is a kind of meditation anyway. It's just easier, and you get quicker end results. You build your brain much quicker. You build structure and function in your brain much quicker than through meditation. Salah. Yeah, no, certainly. You get into the habit. Once you're in the habit of making salah, your level of consciousness goes up. But it's also about focus. So you can make salah and you can make salah. And if we all made it, the right way, focusing with proper attention, our level of consciousness will rise dramatically. But, attention wonders, focus wonders, concentration wonders. But if we develop this ability using different ways to focus properly during that period of time, we'll really raise our level of consciousness. Certainly agree with the caller.
Inshallah. 0216991786 or 0786101112. Dr. Faiez Kirsten in studio, speaking about habits, and I want to touch a bit more on what I mentioned before the break about following blindly, and how we must get into this habit of just allowing others to lead and we follow. Is that a cultural thing?
It's a brain thing. That's the way we basically order followers, in a sense. The education system has taught us to obey blindly without thinking. That's why in many ways, the education system is very diabolical. It's not really designed. We think we go to school, for our own benefit, so to become better people, more successful in life. And meanwhile, they're training us basically just be sheep and cattle, just to obey orders, obey authority without thinking or questioning. And the minute you question authority, if you're in school, you stand up and say, this teacher says something and she doesn't like what you said, and she'll immediately chastise you. Sit down, don't ask stupid questions. And then you learn not to ask any question because you're going to be chastised. And in society, that happens. You question people who are doing things that are wrong. And in position of authority, they don't like it. They throw you in a cage. You call it jail, and that's the world we live in. So people have learned to become obedient
followers. But we want to undo this. We want to or unlearn this. I don't know.
I want to give you a good example. The first point I want to make about is cravings. I'll come back to the example and then we talk about what you mentioned. A craving happens because as you doing the habit and it's becoming more ingrained, the dopamine, the reward chemical, the feel-good chemical is actually released earlier and earlier during the 3-stage process. Whereas it's released by the time when you have when you finish the habit, then dopamine gets released and that's your part of your reward. Whatever your reward is associated with dopamine, right? That's why you feel good. But as the habit becomes more and more ingrained, the dopamine is released earlier and earlier in the sequence until it's released by the time of the cue. So you'll find when you just think about the habit or think about what you want to do, dopamine is released and you get this urge, this craving basically, and you'll automatically go and perform that habit. But I want to give you an example of Procter & Gamble, who came up with a product called Febreze many years ago. And it was marketed as something to get bad smells out of clothing, but it failed. I mean, nobody bought it because it discovered that people get used to bad smells. They don't smell it after a while. You become desensitized to it, right? And then they did some more market research, and then what they did was they associated Febreze as they made it into a room freshener. So what would happen is they marketed in such a way that when people clean their rooms, then they would use Febreze as a air freshener rather. Okay, so the cue was the clean room. As soon as you clean your room, that triggers the behavior or the routine, which is to go and get the Febreze, the bottle of Febreze, and spray your room with this Febreze. Okay, and then the reward is you feel good because you've done a good job and your room smells good. Okay, so they knew about obviously how habits work, and then they developed that marketing strategy based on how habits work, and people went and automatically then bought Febreze, and the sales skyrocketed.
We do have a call on the line, Radio 786. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and your guests.
Alaikum assalam.
In fact, when we talk about drugs, we always talk about these things that people have to sniff and smoke. But then if we analyze the definition of the Quran, then lies, gossip, theft, these are also a form of drugs that you have to fight from within. Because Allah says in the Quran, if you obey most people on earth, they do nothing but they lead you astray from the path of Allah, and they do nothing but lie. So we must try to define what is drugs actually. Because people, they keep on lying, then they start believing their own lies. So this is what I'm very happy for this program, because we should have more programs like this where people can participate and try to input about what is happening in society, what is the ills of society. We always define things to drugs, but it is more than that. Jazakumullah.
Shukran wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dr. Faiez, before you comment, we also have a interesting question here via WhatsApp that says, Assalamu alaikum, could the interventions mentioned by the doctor also be applied to stroke victims, and has he written on the subject?
Neuroplasticity has helped stroke victims overcome their disability, basically. So through neuroplasticity, certainly you can become cured of a stroke, without a doubt. In fact, Jill Boltman, I think she's a pathologist who actually describes, on YouTube you can actually see a video, how she describes how she overcame she had a stroke, and then she basically recovered from that stroke. It was a massive stroke, and she recovered, and neuroplasticity is part of that whole healing process. I haven't written on it, no, but I know of many cases. Yeah.
We have about 2 minutes left before we have to conclude.
Yeah.
And it's probably a topic that we will have to revisit again, inshallah. But we have one more person wanting to know your details, and we'll do that at the end, inshallah. But before we do that, just in closing, what do we take from this morning's discussion in terms of the ability to kick bad habits, but also the power of the mind and how we can control it instead of others controlling it?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to address that brother's point, certainly we get into the habit of gossiping and being jealous. These are all habits, bad habits, okay, and we need to work on getting rid of them. He's quite right there. The mind is extremely powerful, and it can work for you and it can work against you. It depends on how you use your mind. It starts with you understanding how your mind works, but it really starts with raising your level of consciousness. That's the real starting point for me, anyway. And once you raise your level of consciousness, now you can decide. Now you can make decisions. It gives you the ability to choose what you want to do. You can either just leave your mind the way it is and observe what's happening in there and say, I'm going to do nothing about it. Or you can do something about it, okay, and then make it work for you so that you can counteract all these diabolical negative forces that are basically trying to destroy you and have been very successful in destroying a lot of people over a long period of time. People are suffering unnecessarily. People are dying unnecessarily. There's a massive global health crisis simply because we really don't know how our minds work and how our minds are being used against us by people who don't have our own interests at heart. That is the crux of the matter. So we have this responsibility. You got to take responsibility yourself to start changing things.
Inshallah, and may we take that responsibility and may we also take heed from this discussion this morning. I am definitely looking forward to our next session, Dr. Faiez. Just in closing, would you please just spell out the doctor's email address? I have emailed, but with no success. Perhaps, Doctor, you can maybe do that.
It's Faiez, that's Faiez, at Brain Science, BrainScience, Brain Science, one word, .co.za. Faiez at brainscience.co.za.
There you have it. It's Faiez at brainscience.co.za. Brain and science, one word, .co.za. That's it for this morning for the first hour. Dr. Faiez, shukran so much for your time. Looking forward to the next time, inshallah.
Afwan Zainab, shukran for having me. Appreciate it.
Do stay tuned to Radio 786 and 100.4 FM as Community Pulse continues this morning. And that was the discussion or conversation we just had with Dr. Faiez, speaking about habits and how to kick some of those bad habits, but also how to exercise the power of our minds, inshallah, and maybe all reach that level and kick some of those bad habits that is detriment to our health. Stay with us.